Welcome in, everybody. We are pretty close to the midterm, actually. So right now it is week 6. We are 2 weeks away from the midterm. Exactly 2 weeks. Next week, I'm going to release a practice midterm, and it's going to help folks get ready for it. If anything, the practice midterms is going to be a bunch of functions, right? Most of the exam questions will be, hey, write a function that is expected to do this. So yeah, you'll see next week. Today we're going to go over something called interactive programs. It should be pretty fun, actually. You know, lately we've been kind of writing programs, but haven't really been able to kind of interact with it. So today we're going to see something called event-driven programming. So let me load up this notebook real quick. Basically, event-driven programming means that the program state will change when we make a change. So here, let me make some sense on this. Lessons. Okay, interactivity. So this is lesson number 11. And yeah, event-driven programming. This means our program is dynamic, right? It's going to respond to real-world events. Meaning we're finally going to be able to, kind of use our mouse and interact with our program. So there should be some pretty cool stuff. I do want to point out that this notebook showcases a feature of Jupyter Notebook. It's not really a classic Python thing. So this notebook will be using a library called IPyWidgets. And just to look at this real quick, I'm going to be referring to this documentation a lot. IPyWidgets is a kind of like a third-party extension. This is extending the Jupyter notebooks. It's going to allow us to use, our mouse to click on things. So we'll see down here, right? We're going to be able to use some sliders, right? Kind of drag them, and then that's going to kind of change the result of this output. And let's see, is there any more here? No, there's a lot. We're going to see a couple of them in just a bit. But yeah, I did want to reiterate that this is not classic Python stuff. Therefore, I'm not going to expect folks to know this off the top of their head. I'm not going to have any exam questions that's testing on this, but it's worth knowing, right? This feature is worth knowing because it's pretty fun stuff, right? Scientists use it to kind of interact with their programs, and also you're going to see this in the next few projects as well. So once again, in the next few projects, let's see if I have them here. Yeah, the next few projects will be using this library, but it's going to be written for you, right? The widgets will be written for you, and all you have to do is complete another step that will get the widgets working. Yeah, so once again, I'm not expecting folks to kind of fully understand this this feature. It's going to be done for you, right? I'll keep repeating this as we release assignments. All right, you'll see what I mean by this stuff will be done for you, and all you have to do is do some other step. Okay. Excuse me. Any questions so far? All right, this is going to be some pretty cool stuff. So, well, first we're going to kind of introduce this. It should be a pretty short day. We're going to introduce this. We're going to go over the lab together too. So I'm not going to expect folks to get this done themselves. So I'm going to go over this for folks. And then after that, show some applications, right? Like remember last week, I showed like a fun little application on like a roulette game. Let me see if I have it over here. Yeah, here it is. It's in my examples directory. So you might remember from last week, we applied functions and kind of wrote a quick program that simulates roulette, right? Like we start off with 200 bucks. How much are we betting? $10. What number are you betting on? I'll bet on 0, and then enter, and then yeah, ball landed on 1, so I lose, and the game now starts over. So at the end of class today, I'm gonna kind of extend this program, right? Extend it by adding in some more fun interaction. Okay, so let me quit that real quick. Okay, let's go to the lesson. Okay, here we are. I want to run this first cell. The whole point of this notebook is to kind of introduce some Jupyter features. And these features come from IPy widgets, which stands for Interactive Python Widgets. So let me run this, press play. Okay. We're going to see a few of them, right? We're not going to see all of them. It's going to be kind of information overload if I introduce all of the widgets to us. So let's kind of introduce a few of them, one at a time. So this right here is going to be a button, right? We're pretty much, this highlighted line, this represents a widget with a button, and then it's going to be displayed as so. All right, so you can pretty much click this. It doesn't do anything yet, and that's because we're not really capturing any value here. All right, so we'll talk about this in just a bit. But there's a checkbox here as well. This is another feature of the IPy widgets. Let me go ahead and run this cell again. All right, this checkbox, it kind of returns a Boolean value, right? Like whether or not it's on or off. So when I check this, something turns on, right? You don't really see it, but pretty much the value of whatever I highlighted here, right? The value of this returns true, or evaluates to true. So we'll talk about return values later, but it should make sense in a bit. So here's the text box. This is another type of widget. Let me press play. Text box here, right? You can pretty much type in it. Like I could say hello. Right? It's not doing anything right now, but what I just highlighted here, this is going to now evaluate to hello. Right? It's going to evaluate to whatever we typed in. All right, so that's just kind of demonstrating a few of them. The more important ones we'll see today are kind of some sliders. So let me just review stuff from last week. Last week we went over some functions. So what is this function here? Right, it's called hello interact. Well, it takes an argument a. Right, this could be anything, and then all this function is doing is kind of just echoing it back out. Right, so I know this kind of looks hard to read, but all it's doing is repeating back information. Right, that's all it's doing. So let me go ahead and play this. So I'll play this, meaning I'm loading the function into the kernel, and now let's go ahead and test it out. Right, let's go ahead and invoke the function down here. So this is going to invoke it. 100 is going to be passed into a, and then the function is just going to spit it back out. Right, it's just going to spit out some information on it, like the type and the value. Right, so yeah, let me press play here. All right, see, so this function evaluates to this string. Right, this is just a string. So hopefully people kind of see what's happening. Right, it's describing the argument. Right, the argument is a class integer. Right, that comes from here, the type, and then it describes the value. Right, the value here is 100. Right, so let me go ahead and print this out and kind of test with different arguments, so folks are kind of familiar with this function. Okay, so let me invoke another one. So let me go hello interact, and let me try like 200. All right, so go 200. Let me print this because technically this function returns a string, so I'm going to go ahead and print that string. Okay, press play, and there we go. Right, you can see the function is just describing it. 200 is an integer. Its value is 200. All right, here let's do another one. Let's do a couple more. All right, so I'll print hello interact, and let's try a decimal now, like maybe 100.0. All right, 100.0. Let's press play, and you see how it's different. All right, once again, all this function is doing is describing the argument. Right here we pass in 100.0. This is a float, a fancy word for a decimal. Okay, let's try out some more variable types. We saw strings, right? So let me put a string literal in here. Like I'll just put hello. That's all I can think of. Actually, no, I won't put hello. Pretty much reusing that. I'll just say Andrew, my first name. So press play, and there we go. The fourth line is saying, oh, this is a string. The type is a string, and then the value is Andrew. Okay, let's do one more. Right, another type of variable that we've seen is a list. All right, so in here I can just hard code a list. Like, let me hard code a list of strings. All right, like maybe let's say Santa Cruz, and then maybe Aptos. Right, a list of 2 different strings. So let's play this. And there we go. Are people kind of getting familiar with what this function is doing? All right, all it's doing is describing the arguments. All right, so this is a list. Its value is this list. Okay, so now that we're familiar with this function, let's go ahead and interact with it. This is kind of like a manual way of interacting with a function. A manual meaning we had to invoke it by kind of typing it out. It's possible to kind of spawn a widget where the widget will change the inputs for us, right? The inputs being the arguments. So one way we'll see that is with something called an integer slider. So let me go to the documentation here. So I'm going to be referring to this a lot. So IPy widgets, you can just Google this. And then here on the left, I'm going to click on widget list. Okay, and this is the primary documentation. The first one we'll see is something called an int slider, right? It's going to look like this right here. We can drag, and then it's going to change some value. So let's go ahead and spawn this type of widget. All right, so the way we do that, here, I'm going to type this out manually. So we imported a library, IPy widgets. All right, this library has a function called interact. All right, this is a kind of like a class function because of this dot right here. And then this function is going to take some amount of arguments. The first argument will represent the name of the function we're interacting with. So let's say we wanted to interact with this function here. All right, so this is called hello interact. So I'll go hello interact. And then the next argument, it's gonna be controlling the argument for this. I know I'm using the word argument a lot, but whatever you put in here is going to go into here, the argument for the function that we're interacting with. So if I put like a is equal to 100, right, let's go ahead and see what happens. So I'll press play, and I gotta scroll up a bit. It keeps scrolling down. Okay, so I press play. We see an integer slider here, and so we spawned a widget. A right here starts at 100, meaning that when we spawn the widget, right, it's centered at 100, and that's the default value. We can change it, right? We can kind of drag it up and down and change it. And we see here, right below the widget, we see the return value of the function. People see what I mean here? The return value of the function. Okay, let's see. So all we did right here was kind of this right here. We wrote a widget to kind of interact with an integer. Right? If we did it with 200, let's see what happens. All right, we got 200. So let's press play, and then I got to scroll up again. There we see it's centered at 200, right? The default's 200. We can kind of change this value up and down. Okay, let's do this with the rest of here. So if we did it with this right here, with the 100.0, then the way we would call that is by maybe spawning another widget. So IPy widgets interact, and then once again the name of the function we're interacting with, and then here this is gonna control what goes into this function. So I'll say a is equal to 100.0. Okay, let me press play. So I'm just gonna press Control Enter actually, because when I press play, it kind of scrolls down. It makes me lose my spot. So Control Enter. There we go. Okay, I ran the cell. We see a second widget. All right, this widget is once again describing the default value 100.0, right, and kind of just spitting it back out. So we can, control it. All right, so these are sliders. This first one is actually an integer slider. The second one is called a float slider. There's a lot of magic happening, by the way. In particular here, what I'm highlighting, there's a lot of magic here. I'm gonna unpack it in just a bit. All right, let's do another one. Let's interact with it, but with a string. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same exact one. So IPy, and then hello interact, and then I'll say the default value will be a string. All right, let me just put Andrew here. Okay, let me press Control Enter. Once again, Control Enter is this keyboard shortcut right here. Run the selected cell and do not advance. So Control Enter. We see a different widget here, right? It's no longer a slider. This is a text box. All right, so there's a lot of magic happening here, right? This thing that I highlighted, basically the library IPy widgets is seeing, oh, this is a string. So spawn a text box instead. All right, so it's actually, let me go to the primary documentation. All right, it's going over here called a string widget. Right, in particular, we're using something called a text, and you can type anything in it. So that's what we're using here. Okay, let's do one more and then kind of put it all together. So let's do a list. Right, what happens if we put a list as the argument? So let me try that. Hello interact, and then a, right, I'm going to set it to a list, a hard-coded list of 2 strings. So Santa Cruz and then Aptos. Okay, what type of widget is this going to give us? Is it going to give us a string, like a text box? Maybe, let's see. So let me run it, Control Enter. And there we go. Here's our 4th widget. Right? It looks like a text box, but it's actually a drop-down menu. It's allowing us to choose any item in this list. Right? If I choose Aptos here, we see that the value of the function is describing what we chose. And then choose Santa Cruz. Right? It's changing this. This is called a drop-down. So go into the primary documentation. This is a selection widget right here on the right. Right? It's a selection widget called drop-down. That's what we're using. Okay. I do want to unpack a lot of magic that's happening here. Maybe if you want to have a little more control over the widget, you could kind of spawn these manually. Like for example, with this first one here, let me comment this out. Right, this first one is a integer slider. Right, you see how it kind of it starts at 200, and then the bounds are 600, and then the left bound is negative 200. Right, that's the default behavior. If you wanted to have a bit more control over this, we'd have to kind of spawn this a little more manually. So the magic that's happening here is it's calling the same thing. All right, so I'm going to write the same exact thing, but a little different on the second argument. All right, the magic here is the library sees an integer, So it's going to put an integer slider right here. Right, it's going to put this over here. Let's see, numeric widgets. It's going to use something called a int slider. So it's pretty much saying a is equal to a integer slider from the IPyWidgets library, right, IPyWidgets. And then int slider, you can think of it as like kind of like an object. We haven't really talked about classes or objects yet, but basically inside of these parentheses would be something that would control the widget. Like looking at the primary doc here, this integer slider, we have control over its default value and its minimum and maximum, right? This defines the left and right side of it. So we could use these three configuration arguments. And here I could say, you know, value starts at 200, right? The default value. And I could go ahead and set the minimum and maximum. So the minimum here, I'll set it equal to, what was it? Negative 200, right? So the left bound is negative 200. And then the upper bound, max, is equal to 600. Okay, 600. So yeah, that's a magic that's happening. These two lines are the same. So let me go ahead and run it just to prove it. So there you go. I just pressed play. We have two widgets, right? They're the same thing. They're the same thing. I'm just kind of unpacking the magic that's happening here, right? Basically, the first one is at 200. So the library is going to kind of substitute this 200 with this right here. Right, it's the same thing. Right, so he goes up to 600, goes up to negative 200. The reason why you might want to do this manual method is if you have like if you want to kind of customize it a bit more. Right, like maybe you want to have a lower minimum, maybe you want to have a higher maximum, or maybe you want the default value to be something else. Okay, does that make sense, everyone? Okay. Let me keep unpacking this so folks see what's happening. So let me do some print statements here just to kind of separate things. So here I'm just going to print like a bunch of equal signs just so things look a little neater. All right, once again, if you multiply a string by a number, it gives you a bunch of strings. So it gives us 60 equal signs right here. The reason why I'm doing that is just to kind of separate these things. Okay, so the next one we saw was a float slider. Right, this is different from an integer because there are decimals. So the float slider here, let me press play, is right here. Right, it's starting at 100, and let's see its upper and minimum. So the upper is at 300, the minimum is at negative 100. So the equivalent way, the more manual way we can represent this is we can say that A is equal to a float slider. All right, so that's in the documentation here. Let me go here. It's right here. We're using a float slider. So we could go ahead and do that. IPyWidgets dot float slider, and then the default value here will start it at 100. I mean 100.0. And then it looks like the minimum is at negative 100. So minimum negative 100, and then the maximum is at 300. Okay, cool. So let me run it, and it should be the same exact thing. So Control Enter, and there we go. Right, these two widgets are the same exact thing. Okay. Yep, same thing. Okay, people cool with this so far? Okay, and then let me quickly do a couple more. Let me print this again. Print a bunch of equal signs. Okay. the next widget we saw was a string box, right? A text box, and it looks like this. So okay, let's keep scrolling down. Here's the text box, right? Whatever I type in, you can type in anything, and then it's going to change the value. This is pretty much something called a text box. So the equivalent way you can represent this A is equal to a string widget. So the string widget here, looking at the primary documentation on the right, string widget. This is a text box. So I'm going to go ahead and implement that. So I'm going to say this is equal to dot text, and then the default value, I'll just set it equal to Andrew, and then go ahead and press play. And yeah, there we go, right? See, same thing. All right, people cool with this? All we're doing is kind of unpacking the magic happening in here. All right. Okay, one more, and we'll be done pretty much. Okay. The last type of widget we saw was a drop-down menu. So the drop-down menu here happens when we pass a list. And here it is, right? Drop-down menu. So this is a selection widget. Here, it's over here on the right. It's a selection widget. Drop-down, right? It allows us to choose different things. So let's go ahead and implement that. Interact, and then A is equal to a drop down. So it's ipy widgets dot drop down, and then what else? Let me see. It looks like the configuration is, we say options is equal to a list of some items. Cool. So let's do that. So options is equal to a list of some items, and in here it's just Santa Cruz and then Aptos. You could change the default value too, but I'm just going to leave it as is. It's probably just going to choose the first one as a default. So let me press play, control enter, and there we go, right? See, same exact thing. Okay, people cool with this so far? We talked about widgets, and in particular the magic that's happening. Okay. Okay, let's see. Let's keep going down. Okay, you know what? Here, I'm gonna take a quick 5-minute thing real quick. Let's take a quick 5-minute break. Maybe people are copying this down. Okay, I'll be right back. Give me 1 second. Okay, welcome back, folks. Let's see. So let's talk about choosing the right widget. Well, you know, this depends on the type of variable that we're working with. All right, earlier, these are different types of variables. This first one was an integer. This next one was a float. And then we had some string widgets, and then some list widgets, right? Or selection ones. So yeah, it just kind of depends on what variable type you want to use. So let's see. I'm going to skip over this because we kind of already did this. All right, all of this stuff is up here. So we went over this. I'm going to skip over here. I'm going to actually go to the lab right now and not cover this yet. Decorators, I'm probably not going to cover this. It's kind of like a cool extension. It's not too important unless you're into testing things frequently. And then global widgets, I'm also going to skip over this. Okay, so let's actually apply this stuff, right? We saw a few different types of widgets. So let's go to the lab. I have it loaded up right here. Okay. I'm not expecting folks to be able to do this themselves. Once again, this is just an extension to Jupyter. Right, the IPy widgets. It's not really classic Python. It's I'm not going to be testing folks on it, nor you're not going to be expected to write your own widgets. It is some fun stuff. Right, if anything, you will be kind of expected to write functions that a widget can interact with. Right, so let me play this real quick. Let me play this first cell. Okay. So part one, interactive functions, right? It's asking us to do the step before the interaction. So before we interact with something, we typically have to write a function. Right? We saw that earlier here, right? You see in this lessons notebook, we wrote a function here. Right? All it does is return. It echoes out some information. So that's just a very small function. And then in the future, we ended up writing widgets that interacts with that function. So in this lab, it's asking us to write a function. Right? You don't have to worry about doing the widgets. So this function we actually already did last week. Right? This function says, hey, write a function that adds 2 arguments. So let's go ahead and write it. Right? It's pretty much saying, define a function called add ints, and then here it takes 2 arguments, a and b. So right away a, b, and then return their sum. Okay, so let me actually do a docstring real quick. A docstring will kind of help us understand this. Once again, we did this last week. If folks are curious, you can go to the last lesson. So the last lesson was number 10. We did it right over, no, not in the lesson, the lab, I mean. So lab 10. We did it right over here, right? The lab number 10, we wrote a function that returns the sum of 2 arguments, right? So it's the same exact function, just with a different name. Okay, back to lab 11 then. So lab 11, let me just put a function, the purpose, right? The purpose is adds 2 integers. Right? It's just a wrapper for a plus sign. That's really what this function is. Right? There are 2 arguments. A, which is the first integer, and then b, this is the second int. All right, and then there is an output to this function. Right? The output is going to return the sum of a and b. Right, it seems kind of long, but it'll help you understand what you need to do. So here we gotta add these 2 arguments, right? So you could store them into a result. Right, you don't have to store it, but I'm just gonna do this extra step. And then finally we need to return that result. Return result. Okay, let's test it. So I just pressed play. It loaded the function into the kernel. All right, and then before I start interacting with it, it's a good idea to test it manually first. So I'm going to add another cell here and go ahead and test it. So once again, we can invoke the function with add ints. Right, add ints, the name of the function, and we can give it 2 values. So I'll give it like 2 and then 3. Right, okay, let's verify that this evaluates to 5. So yeah, it evaluates to 5. Let me go ahead and print it so I can print out more results. Now, once again, we're testing this function to make sure it works. So let's try 13 plus 4. This should give us 17. Okay, cool, it looks good. And then let's try out some negative numbers. Let's try out like -5 and then 4. Right, this should give us -1. So, okay, cool. There we go, right? We wrote a function. We sanity checked its return values. And now this interaction widget is written for us. Right? If you're curious what it's doing, it's interacting with the add integers function that we just wrote. And then the two arguments here are default 10 and 20, right? Meaning that they're going to give us two integer sliders. So I'll press play here and see what's happening, right? We get two integer sliders, and the return value from this function is right here, right? The return value is 30 because it's 10 plus 20. And we can go ahead and change things, like increase this up to 30, and now it's 50. All right, we can make this negative, so 30 minus 10. All right, people are cool with this. So yeah, this is what I mean by I'm not expecting folks to be able to write widgets, but if you're able to write a function that fully satisfies this specification, then the widget will work seamlessly. Okay. Cool. Any questions about this so far? Pretty cool stuff, right? All right. Let me go ahead and run this feedback. So, okay, all tests passed. Cool. All right. This is a same style question. It's saying, hey, write a function, and then later on we're going to test it. So this function should be called hyper_link. So let me go ahead and define something called hyper_link. And then it's going to take two inputs, a URL and then a text. So right away we can say URL and then text. All right, and then let me go ahead and do a docstring real quick, just so we can understand its purpose. All right, so the purpose here is it's just going to generate a HTML hyperlink. Right, a HTML hyperlink. It's gonna use these two arguments. So generate an HTML hyperlink. There we go. And then there are two arguments. All right, the arguments URL. This is a string that represents where to go. URL is like a website, so it's like a website address. So this is a string that represents the link target, and next we got a text. This is the text that's going to be clickable, right? Okay, and it is going to return something. Here we see it returns an HTML object, right? This is kind of important. An HTML object. So returns an HTML object with the hyperlink. All right. Cool. So let's go ahead and write that. So coming from a couple weeks ago, you might remember a hyperlink looks like this right here. So let me go to the lessons. Intro to HTML, lesson number 9. You might remember a hyperlink was represented by the A tag, right? Like right here. So we have a opening A tag with the URL. The URL is right here, and then the clickable text is right here. Right, so that's gonna generate us this right here. So yeah, let's go ahead and use this A tag. All right. Okay, you could return it right away, but I'm actually going to create a my_HTML string. All right, I'll create a my_HTML string and then return it later. This will make things a little more easier. I am going to use a multi-line f string because I'm planning on interpolating these two variables into it. So let's go ahead and get that ready. So a hyperlink looks like a and then a closing one, a, right, /a. So there you go, there's a hyperlink. Now all we need is the URL. So if you look at the previous lesson, you can put href is equal to some string, and then inside of the string will contain the address, right? So this is going to be the URL, and in between it, it's going to be the clickable text, right? The clickable text is right here, right? So we're interpolating that variable, and then let's go ahead and return it. All right, so this is creating an HTML string, and now let's go ahead and return it. It does have to be an HTML object. That's because that's what the kind of question is asking for. So you can return it as an object just by kind of wrapping it in this HTML thing. There we go. Real quick, we're probably going to get an error. I need to probably import something. This HTML thing comes from a library. So let me go ahead and import it. Let me go to lesson 9 and copy and paste the first line. Okay, here it is. So import HTML. This will let us convert it. So copy and then kind of paste it here at the top of the cell. Okay, there we go. Cool, so let me press play. And okay, so we loaded this into the kernel. Let's go ahead and test it manually. Right? There is a widget here that will test it for you, but you should probably test it manually first. So let me add a new cell and then go ahead and invoke the function. Right, the function is called hyperlink. So hyperlink, and then it takes 2 arguments. And I'm gonna go ahead and kind of hard code a couple values here. All right, let's say we're going to google.com. All right, so the URL for the first argument is a string. You could say google.com. I think the full address is this right here. Right, you can copy and paste this from google.com. And then the second argument represents the clickable text. So here we go. The text, I'm just going to say Google right here. All right, so this does return an HTML. So let's look at the value of it. I'll press play, and there we go. Right, this evaluates to this HTML object, which we can pretty much click, and it'll bring us to Google. All right, so hopefully people are seeing what's happening here. Right, you can test this with more arguments if you want. Like here, let me display this real quick. Right, it's not going to look like it makes a difference, but it's going to allow us to display more in the same cell. Let me keep testing this. So let me go hyperlink, and let me link to my coworker's website. So my coworker is named Mike Matera. His website is right here. So lifealgorithmic.com, and then for the text argument, right, this argument here, I'm just going to give it a value. Like I'm just going to say Mike's website. Mike's website. So let me display this and then press play. There we go. I press play, so it's displaying 2 HTML objects. All right, first one is Google, and next one is Mike's website. I click on this, it'll bring us to his site over here. My fellow coworker. Okay. Cool. So we're testing manually, right? If folks are wondering, we are manually invoking the function, right? It's just to test it out, make sure we don't have any errors. Okay, and then this next cell is already written for us, right? All it does is spawn a widget. So if you take a look at it, right, the first argument represents the name of the function we're interacting with, and then the next arguments represent the values that we're going to be passing in. Right, these are default values. The first one is a string, next one is a string. So it's going to give us 2 text boxes. All right, see it? There's one text box here that represents that, and another one. And you can pretty much change these things, right? Like if I were to say HTTPS google.com and change this to Google, right? We see the return value changes, right? This is the return value from the function, an HTML object. All right, people cool with this so far? All right, let's see. Oh, there's a feedback cell right here. Okay. All right, cool. That's pretty much the lab. There's one more part here. This is pretty much the opposite of part 1. All right, part one here, we just did 2 questions. It was really asking us to write a function, and then the widget is already provided for us. Part 2 is opposite. All right, part 2 is saying, hey, there is a function. Go ahead and write a widget for it. All right, so yeah, it's opposite. So you saw this last week. This is a function that draws a triangle. If you were to kind of test it manually, let me create a new cell here. So create a new cell. We could test it manually by saying triangle, right, and then putting some value here, like 50. Right, 50. Press play. Let me scroll up a bit. All right, there we go. Right, I manually invoked this triangle function. Let me go triangle 100. All right, press play, and there you go. Right, drew a triangle of bigger size. All right, people cool with this? So yeah, we saw this last week. If anything, now it's asking us to make this function interactive. So you could look at previous examples. It's pretty much ipywidgets.interact. All right, so let's go ahead and get that. All right, so ipywidgets.interact, and then the first argument represents the name of the function. So here we're going to be interacting with triangle. So triangle here, and the next is going to be something that represents what we're passing into this function. Right, we're passing a size into it. So we could say, size is equal to, maybe here we're expecting some number. You could think of it as an integer. So we could hard code like 100 here. This is like saying the default size is 100. And then once again, the magic that's happening is the widget library will resolve this to a integer slider. All right, see, we see this. Where is it? Okay, I keep scrolling down, my bad. So I just pressed play. Here it is. All right, it resolved to an integer slider. And when we change it, right, we see that the return value, right, you see the return value is not really returning anything, but the function is kind of drawing a triangle. Right, showing us the result from the function. Pretty cool, right? Okay. Cool. Any questions about this so far? All right. Let's see. Let me press play here. Okay, all tests passed. Nice. Okay, final one. This is the same style. A function is already provided for us. Now it's just asking us to write a widget to interact with it. All right, so you can go ahead and study this function. You can just look at its arguments, and you can just look at the docstring and immediately tell what it does. Right, it's doing some stuff with HTML. If anything, it's taking two arguments. Right, one is kind of like a string, right? A tag that represents a string, or I mean a string that represents a tag. And then the contents, this is like a text, right? Some sort of text to put in between. So yeah, this is HTML stuff. And we see that on the return value, it's returning, some text that's surrounded by custom tags. Right, so this, you can think of this as going back to the lesson 9. Right, so lesson 9, you might remember the bold stuff. Where is it at? Yeah. So going back to lesson 9, you might remember this stuff right here. Right, this is an italics tag. Right, the content is between it. Right, and then here's a bold tag. Content is here, and an underline tag. All right, so we're pretty much doing this, but a little more general. If anything, it says the tag can either be I, B, or U. All right, so this is kind of a hint right here. This is kind of like a selection, right? We want to have a selection widget that represents either of these strings. Okay, so let's go ahead and make the function interactive. All right, so it's ipywidgets.interact, and then the name of the function. Right? Name of the function is myTag. And then the next arguments represent the things that we're passing into this function. Right? So we have two things, tag and then contents. So we could say tag is equal to something, right? A tag here, hopefully people got a hint that this is a selection widget. Right? We kind of need to represent, here I'll pull it up again, ipywidget dot, I'm just going to Google it, ipywidgets. Okay, it's going to look like this right here. Right? Pretty much it's expecting a drop-down menu where we have different options. And you can think of the options as representing different HTML tags, like italics, bold, and then underline. Right, so it's gonna be very similar. So we gotta make a drop-down menu. And you might remember in the lesson, one way you can make a drop-down menu is by kind of specifying a list here. Right, so if I say tag is equal to a list of options, let me put three options here. Right, it's either I, B, or U. Right, so I, B for bold, and U for underline. Right, this is going to give us a drop-down menu because there's some magic happening. The ipywidgets sees a list, and then it's going to convert this into a drop-down menu. Okay, there's one more thing we need to put in here. Right, it's going to be the second argument. So this is some string, right? So we could say contents is equal to some string. So some quotes here. I'm actually probably just going to leave it empty for now. So it can be empty on default. All right, let's go ahead and test this. So press play. And let's see. Oh, I got a error. My tag is not defined. This probably means I didn't run the cell above. Yeah, see, I didn't run this cell, meaning I never loaded this function into the kernel. So let me press play here. And then run this. Cool, now it works. And yeah, there's two widgets. Right? This first drop-down widget comes from here. Right? Tag with three different options. And then contents, this gives us the text widget. So I could put something in here like hello world, and we see the return value is hello world. It's a HTML object. All right, that's this function right here. And you can change it, like B makes it bold, U makes it underline. All right, this is event-driven programming here. Whenever there's a change in one of the widgets, it's going to automatically call this function for us. Right, that's kind of what event-driven programming means. It's like a dynamic changes. Pretty cool stuff, right? And then all tests pass. Great. Okay, and going off topic a bit, lines like this can get arguably long. So you could put it on multiple lines to make it look easier to read. Like you could put all the arguments on separate lines, like this right here. Right, and then it's arguably easier to read. But yeah, hopefully people see what's happening here. Okay. Any questions about this so far? Okay, so all we really did was kind of work on a lab that, here's a lesson. All we did was work on a lab that kind of applied three different widgets. A slider widget, a text widget, and then a drop down. That's all we really did. Okay. So yeah, just repeating myself again, I'm not going to be testing folks on interaction with functions, but I am expecting folks to be able to write functions at least. Okay, let's see, where are we at? Okay, I'm going to skip. Okay, so this right here, choosing the right widget, we already talked about this in the beginning of class. let's see. There's, let me make sure. Yeah, if anything, there's a lot of widgets. There's so many different ones. You could look at it. This is a color picker. So if you were to use this, it's a pretty cool widget actually. Maybe press play here. The widget here is we can kind of click on this color here, and then choose whatever color we want. So yeah, pretty cool stuff right here. There's something called a date picker. This is gonna give us a calendar right over here. Right, click the calendar and kind of change the value here. All right, let me give an actual value. There it is. All right, the type is a date time. This is another library, and then the value is this right here. All right, yeah, people cool with this so far? Yeah, lots of widgets. If you're really curious into this, you can look at the primary documentation. There's a lot of them. See on the top, on the right, there's a lot of them. We only went through like 3 of them. Let's see, controller. What is this? Connect the gamepad. Oh, that's pretty cool. We can connect the gamepad and kind of use it. I don't think this is going to work with us though, because we're technically connected to a server. So you'd have to connect the gamepad to our server. Let me see, what else is there? Buttons. Some buttons, what else? Image. Okay, open images. Yeah, there's a bunch. This is useful stuff for in my grad school. I did use widgets. Basically, I would create graphs, and using the widgets, I'd be able to kind of control the size of the graph. So you can imagine like maybe the slider, right? Like maybe you want to zoom in on a part of a graph. Like maybe you want to zoom into the right side of it, kind of move it over. So yeah, this has some really good use cases. We'll see some applications on Thursday. On Thursday, I'm actually going to introduce a new assignment. Right here, it's called HTML weather functions. Is it? Yeah. I already published this assignment. If folks want to take a look at it, it's going to be some pretty cool stuff. Yeah, it's going to be some pretty cool stuff. It's going to involve interactive programs. But the widget will be written for you, so you won't have to do it. You'll just have to write a function, and then the widget will interact with it for you. Okay, let's see. Any questions about this? Okay. I will be skipping over the last things in the notebook. They're not too important. Like here, a decorator. I'm not going to go over a decorator. This is pretty much another way of calling a function. I don't think folks will be using this in this class at all. So you can take a look at it. It's just another way of calling a function. And then global widgets. In my opinion, global things are kind of bad programming practice. So yeah, if folks want to kind of look into this, all it's really doing is creating a couple global variables and then changing them. So yeah, you can go ahead and run this cell if you want. It's pretty much if we were to change any of these items here in the drop-down menu, it's going to change this next widget. So yeah, folks can look into this. I wanted to go over an application though, a kind of a fun application. So here, I'm done with this notebook. Let's kind of go over something from last week. If you were here last week, you might remember I did a quick example on the roulette. Roulette is kind of a gambling game, and it's pretty much where you spin a wheel, right? That's really what it is. It's you choose a number, spin a wheel, and then if you got it right, then you win. Right? That's pretty much how the game works. So last week we ended off writing a couple functions, right? Pretty much a helper function called spin wheel, and then another function here called play round. So yeah, these are two functions, and we ended up kind of invoking it down here. All right, this is, let me go ahead and press play. Did I press play here? Oh, it looks like it's frozen. Why is it frozen? Let me reload this notebook. So this asterisk here means something is running. Okay, yeah, let me refresh this notebook. Refresh. Okay. Cool. Let's press play here. Huh. Yeah, it's frozen. Let me see why. I'm not sure why it's frozen. It might be the server lagging. Let me comment out some things. I'll just comment out this. And it shouldn't freeze anymore because we're not really calling any functions. So press play. Scroll up. Let me stop it. Press play. Okay, so it ran. Cool. So it loaded the functions. And let me run this now. Okay, press play. Oh, okay, there it is. Yeah, I guess the server was lagging. Anyways, so the program finally started. Right, the program kind of starts here. We initialize a variable to 200, and then this is going ahead of the scope of the class. We haven't really talked about while loops yet, but you can just think of this as play the game while we have money. Right, that's what it's saying. And then while we're playing while we're playing the game, it's going to update our balance. Right, so this is going to be looped over and over again, meaning balance will become a new number every single time. So you might remember that we're stuck inside the function right now. Right, we're not done with the program yet. You see here on the top left, right, there's an asterisk. This means the cell is still running. We are stuck inside of this input function. Right, we called the play round function. So it's saying, hey, go into play round. And now we are stuck in here. Right, we're waiting for input. So when I type in like $10 here, right, and when I press enter, it's gonna finish that function. Right, so this function got finished, and now we're going into here. Right, so what number are we betting on? Let's go like number 5, right, and press enter, and then yeah, so ball landed on 15, we lost, and now we have 190. Right, so yeah, folks can take a look at the design if you copied it down. But I'm planning on kind of using widgets to play with this. Right, it might be more fun to use widgets instead of using the input function. So let me redesign this program a bit to apply the widgets. All right, let me stop this cell here because this cell is still running. So let me press stop. There we go, cell stopped. And then yeah, keyboard interrupt. This just means we interrupted the program. Let me clear this. Clear the output. Okay, I'm planning on kind of redesigning some things. If anything, I'm probably going to remove this piece right here. Let's see. I'm going to kind of simplify this scenario a bit, just to make things a little easier to understand. So this function play round, I'm actually going to change the design of this a bit. Currently, the design is you give it a bankroll, and then you kind of give a wager and a guess, and then depending on what wager or guess you get, we'll have some different returns. Right, this pretty much subtracts or adds to your bankroll, and then returns it to the caller. So you can see this stuff from last week. Just go ahead and look at the previous recording. I went more into this on detail. So if anything, I'm going to change the design a bit to, instead of taking a bankroll, let's go ahead and kind of generalize this. So you see these two inputs here, the wager and guess. You know, it might be I'm going to design it to where we're not going to ask on the input. Right? Instead, we're going to ask from a widget. So I just commented this stuff out. I'm going to forget the bankroll here. Right, so let me delete the bankroll. And then delete the bankroll here. And right here too. The reason why is because I'm planning on having two different arguments. Just the wager and then the guess. Right, so earlier we had wager and guess here. But I'm going to generalize it to a widget. So here I'm going to have wager and then guess. And let me go ahead and describe it. Wager and guess. Let's see. I'm going to have it. Wager is going to. It represents how much is being bet. Right, and then guess represents the number that was guessed. So let's get that. And then I'm going to also change the output. Instead of returning the resulting bankroll, I'm just going to return the profit, right? Meaning it's going to be a positive or negative number. So I'm just going to return the profit or a loss, right? Because you can lose. Okay. This means I'm going to change these return statements because the return statement is really modifying the bankroll. But since we got rid of it, I'm just going to return the profit here. Right? So if we win, it's going to return profit, you know, wager times 35. And if we lose, I'm just going to return the negative wager, right? Because if we guessed wrong, this is how much we lose. All right, cool. Let me before I write the widgets, let me manually test this play around function. Okay, so let me manually test it. Let me load these first. So I'm press play here, meaning I loaded two functions into the kernel. And let me go ahead and test it. So play round. All right, play round now takes two arguments, right? The amount of money, an integer, and then another integer here. So this is integer. Let me just modify this docstring. An integer, an integer. Cool, so let's go ahead and put two values in here. Right, let's say I were to wager like $10, and then I were to guess the number 15. Right, so this is saying, hey, I'm putting $10 on the number 15. So let me play this round and see what happens. So play round, and okay, I lost the, yeah, because it landed on 12, and then negative 10. Right, this represents the value of this function. Right, it gave us negative 10 because we lost. Right, negative wager. So let me actually run this again just to make sure our random number generator is working. So run it again. There it is. 19, we lost. Okay, let me run it again. At some point I should win. I got like a 1 in 36 chance of winning. So let me keep running this. Okay. 10. Okay, I keep losing. It's never gonna land on 15, huh? Almost. Let's see. Okay, I lost a lot right there. So folks can kind of imagine that I'm losing $10 every time. Once again, I'm just manually testing it. Let me keep testing it until I see a green win. Okay. All right, looks like I'm probably, yeah, I'm getting very unlucky. Okay, you know, I'm gonna stop playing this. Hopefully this kind of gives a lesson that it's kind of hard to win. Let's see. Let me give it a few more tries. is never landing on 15. That's crazy. Huh. Okay, well that makes sense, you know, it's random. And you can have bad luck sometimes. So, there it is. So I don't know how many times I ran it, probably like 100. But yeah, just to verify what's happening here. And then we see the return value from this function, 350, right? Because I put 10 bucks down, and if we landed it, then we win the wager times 35. That's the typical house payout. Okay, anyways, this is manually testing it. Let's go ahead and write some widgets that will kind of allow us to interact with it. Right, this way we don't have to kind of play the cell over and over again. So we can import something called IPyWidgets. All right, so let me import it real quick. Import IPyWidgets. I'm going to replace this. So import IPyWidgets. Let me clear this too. Okay, and then I'm planning on interacting with it. IPyWidgets.interact. The name of the function is called playRound. So I'll say playRound. And then the next will represent the arguments, right? The playRound arguments. And there are two of them here, right? There's wager and there's guess. So I'll say wager is equal to some default value, right? If anything, I'll probably set it to a default of 10. Once again, you can do it manually if you want. Right? Remember in the lesson we did it manually, like right over here. Where is it? Where'd it go? Oh, okay. Let's see. Hold up. I need to refresh this. My notebook is glitching. It's not letting me scroll. Okay, you might remember we did it manually, like here. Right, these two lines are the same, so you could do it manually. Let's actually do that. The reason why is because typically there's a minimum bet and then a maximum bet, right? That represents the bet size. So instead of kind of putting a 10 here, I'm gonna manually say it's an integer slider. Right, you can use whatever widget. I'm going to use an integer slider, and then the minimum here. Let's see. I'll say the minimum is $10, and then the maximum is $2,000. This is like the Vegas standard. Minimum 10, maximum 2,000. Okay, and then what else? We need to represent this second widget, right? The number that we're guessing. So here, my line is going to get pretty long actually. So I'm going to put it on multiple lines. So there's the first argument, there's a second, and then finally the third one is here. Right, the third one represents the guess is equal to. So yeah, what would be a good widget for guess? Right, like a roulette wheel has 36 numbers. Right, what do you think would be a good widget for this? You could use a slider, right? Like you could do a slider from 0 to 36. But let's change things up a bit. Maybe you want to do a drop down. Right? Imagine there's a drop down that has 36 different numbers. So we could do a list of numbers, right? Like we could say the guess is equal to a list of numbers, and it might look tedious, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It's going to be tedious. There is a really short way on doing this. I'll talk about in just a bit. But before I do that, let me actually test this real quick to make sure it's working. So let me press play. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is why you want to test frequently. Cool. So IPyWidget. Okay, I need an S here. So I misspelled this. IPyWidgets. Okay, let me try it again. And oh, okay. It looks like it ran it for us. It didn't really give us a chance to roll the ball. So you know what? This, you don't need to know this, but I'm actually going to kind of, I'm going to insert some configuration so it doesn't autoplay for us. Because right now it's auto-playing, right? I press play and then it immediately auto-played for us. Right? See, it says, oh, ball landed on 35. And then if I keep changing it, right? Event-driven programming means that it's going to call the function every time we change. So, oh, well, under here. Right, it's changing every time. So here, so I'm going to put in some configuration to where I'm going to manually roll the ball. You don't have to know this, but the interact function allows you to use a configuration dictionary. Right, so a dictionary you might remember as curly braces. And this dictionary kind of controls the configuration. Right, like there's a configuration called, I think it's an auto display, or I think it's manual. I think it's called manual. Let me set it to true. And then there's like a label. I think it's called manual. What's it called? Manual something. Let me look it up. I actually have this in the news assignment. Where is it? Testing. Okay. Manual name. Got it. I was just looking at my previous example. So manual name is a role. Okay. This is just a configuration, so it doesn't really autoplay for us. Okay, let me test it. Let's see, call. Did I get that wrong? True, manual name. Interactive. Maybe it's interactive. Oh, okay. I was using the wrong function. There's another function called interactive. It basically is pretty much the same thing, but it's more configurable. So here it's taking the configuration dictionary, and all I really did was have it be manual. So I can go ahead and make a wager, like let's go max bet. All right, max bet is 2,000, and then I'm gonna guess the number 3. All right, so I'll press roll, and the second I press roll, it's going to invoke this function for us. So let's roll, and then I lost. All right, let's try it again. All right, let's roll again. Let me guess 4, and then roll, and ball landed 28. Okay, so I'm just testing, right? You lose. So roll, and then yeah, I keep losing. If anything, I'm gonna put in some more numbers here. Right, it is gonna be tedious to type in all the numbers. There's a cool shortcut you can do. You can do something called list comprehension. You can look this stuff up later. You can look up Python list comprehension. Right, and yeah, folks can look into this. It's pretty much a shortcut on creating a list. So I'm gonna say, hey, this list is gonna be a number for every number in a range of 37. All right, this means this list is going to evaluate to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 36. All right, so let's press play. All right, there we go. So our guess here goes all the way to 36. All right, so that's kind of a cool way we can do it. And then let's go ahead and wager. 12, roll, and you lose. If anything, let me go ahead and clean up these print statements, the HTML. I mean, I'm probably gonna make it more descriptive. Like, oh, you lose $652, right? Whatever our wager is. So here is our headers, right? The you win, you lose. I'm gonna go ahead and convert these to an F string, because I'm planning on interpolating some variable. right? So F string, and then you win some amount of money, right? The amount of money here is wager times 35. And then inside of the losing branch, you just lose the amount of wager, right? That's how the roulette works. So let's go ahead and play this, load this function in, and reload this widget. Okay, let's test it. So let's go $10 minimum bet, and let's bet 15. All right, I'll press roll, and then there we go. All right, I lose 10. Oh, you know what? Let me put a $sign here. Put a $sign, and there we go. It should look a little neater now. Let's go 14. Yeah, there we go. We lost 10 bucks. Go up to 200. Roll. We lost again. 203 this time. Okay, do a different one. Lost again. And at some point we should win. Okay. Yeah, hopefully people will get the point here. This just some cool stuff. Yeah. Cool stuff. All right. Okay, that should be it for today. So we went over interaction, which is really just demonstrating some features of a Jupyter notebook. Right? IPy widgets, it stands for Interactive Python Widget. This is not classic Python, but it's Jupyter stuff. You'll see scientists use this, especially if folks are going into grad school. If you're going to be a scientist and do some experiments, it's likely that some experiments can be simulated, right? So you can simulate some experiments, and you can kind of imagine that when you're presenting the experiments, right, you can present it with some widgets, right? Because when you're presenting to a general audience, right, things should probably be user friendly. So that's kind of what this allows us to do. Okay, that should be it for today. On Thursday, we're going to give a sneak peek into this HTML weather functions, and then next week we'll have some break, right? But I'm gonna be on campus to help folks catch up on previous material, and we'll also deliver a practice midterm. Okay, thank you all for coming, and have a great night, everyone.